Good morning, Silvia. How are you doing today? It's day, let me think a minute. It's day 10 of our adventure. Today we are leaving Evanston, Wyoming, and we'll be in Logan, Utah, north of Salt Lake City. And today's travel is pretty significant for the Mormons and for the Donner Reed party. And I'm looking forward to this, so let's get started. Wow, that's like a winter wonderland. 32 degrees. Another pretty view, but now it's 21 degrees. Brrr. And I'm nearly 7,000 feet in elevation. I never mentioned why I'm not going to follow the Oregon Trail all the way to Oregon. And the reason is that I only have 3 weeks to take this trip. I don't like to stay out longer than about 3 weeks unless Lori is with me. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, I kid her about I don't want to leave her that long with a credit card. But the other reason is that since the beginning of the pandemic, man, when was that? 2020? I don't even remember. It was in March. I started working from home full time. And then I did that for a year and a half and retired, I guess, in September 2021. And so for, almost 3 years, we've been together in one house 24 hours a day. And we found out that we're pretty compatible. We like being around one another. So I miss her and she misses me. So 3 weeks is about long enough. So that means that maybe next year, or certainly by the year after, I will take another trip, probably later in the year, so I don't run into the snow. And I will start at Fort Bridger and continue the trail to Oregon. I finally made it to some red rock country. Welcome to Echo Canyon in eastern Utah. And the Donner Party came through here in 46, and then the Mormons came through here in 47. That's the canyon, and the Mormon Trail and eventually the California Trail came right down through this valley. And the Mormons would have been excited because they would have been getting close to Salt Lake City. They only had a few days left. And the folks on the California Trail were looking forward to getting fresh produce in Salt Lake City. I'm going to pan around slowly. And that's looking west. And we're going to keep going west. I bet you're looking for food, aren't you? That was funny. Car pulled over at the end of the off-ramp, and a woman and a little boy with his pants down around his ankles taking a pee. I pulled up. I had to stop at the stop sign, and I yelled over and I said, "We've got a grandson and we do the same thing," and chuckled. She just laughed back at me. Look at that view. Apparently, if I was willing to hike, there's Pulpit Rock and Witch's Cave, but I don't know where they are, and I'm not going to hike in my motorcycle boots. And I haven't been stopping at Pony Express stations or really making a big deal out of them, but this one just kind of hit me. Maybe it's because I got a warm welcome. Basically, there were 2 buildings here, the station and the corrals, right here on this site. And I've seen these before too and haven't taken a photo or stopped or anything, but this one's kind of neat. I don't know if you can read it. It says Trail 1860, 1861. Over here it says Pony Express. And on this side it's got Weber for the name of the station. I also like the concrete base. It's got 2 worn out horseshoes and some type of belt buckle. So I thought that was worth a stop. That's pretty neat. So I'm going to go on into the little town of Echo and see what's there. This is the main street of Echo, Utah. And it's got quite a history. Looking at this rock here, Echo founded 1854. Donner Party came through in 46. Mormon Trail in 47. Overland Stage Route in 54. Johnson's Army and Utah War, we haven't talked about that, in 57. Gold Rush and California Trail in 57. Transcontinental Telegraph in 61. The railroad in 69. Pony Express in 60. And the Lincoln Highway in 1913. And then a historic church in 1876. A lot happened here. When news arrived in Salt Lake City that the Transcontinental Railroad would pass through Echo Canyon, Brigham Young Jr. purchased the entire Echo Valley from founder James Bromley for a mere $200. So Young Jr. knew that this town would be important to Salt Lake City and in protecting the Mormon interests in this area. And the Deseret News, which was the newspaper produced by the Mormons, reported fewer than 6 buildings by Christmas, but 50 houses 4 weeks later. Echo was a big town important for the railroad, but it never grew into the city that Young Jr. hoped for. Here's another interesting thing. He named all the avenues for his father's wives, and the streets were named for Union Pacific dignitaries. Not all of Brigham Young's wives were represented with street names. He may have selected only his favorites. It says, in any case, advertising plural marriage in an important town like Echo was not a good idea, as Utah was attempting to gain statehood. The federal government did not like the idea of plural marriages, and that was a friction point between the Mormons and the federal government. I chatted with these two guys for quite a while here. Two fine fellows. Well, I made it about a quarter of a mile, and here's another historical marker that's got a couple points that I want to show you. I said that the streets were named for Union Pacific officials and the avenues for Brigham Young's wives. Well, here's Mary Avenue, there's Mary, and here's Durant Street, and that must be Durant. This one's hard to read, but more than 70,000 Mormons passed through here on their way to New Zion in Utah. And this one's got some photos, and I love these old photos. James E. Bromley, Echo's first settler, arrived in 1854. He was in charge of the Weber stage station until 1856, driving the mail coach and 6 mules carrying passengers and the monthly mail. Since that's a stagecoach, I'm assuming that's the station for the stagecoach. And in this photo, taken in 1868, shows Bromley's general store. He stayed in this area until he died, and he had a general store. And that is supposed to be the Pony Express station right there, behind the local ladies. And these old photos, if you look closely, it's interesting what you can notice. Like right here, that's a telegraph pole, and that's a telegraph pole. And then if I go over to the stage station, that is a telegraph pole right there. So these photos were taken after the telegraph came through here. Very interesting. And there's a bunch of people in front of the station right there. You're getting on or getting off the stage. So this is the Weber River crossing, and what makes it significant is that the Donner Party was the first party to cross the river here at this point in 1846. And to understand the significance of this crossing, I need to talk about the Donner Party a little bit. Everyone knows what happened to the Donner Party, and they had gotten a late start from independence anyway, and when they got to Fort Bridger, they were convinced to take a shortcut called the Hastings Cutoff. No wagon had ever taken that shortcut before. And a fellow by the name of Hastings, who had actually produced a handbook for the trail, he had left 8 days earlier, but the people of Fort Bridger convinced the Donner Party that they could catch up with the slow-moving wagon train. So the Donner Party left Fort Bridger and followed the trail of the Hastings Party in front of them, but they never did catch up with them. And a couple of times they found paper notes that Hastings had left saying, you know, take this way or don't take that way or whatever. And one note said, stop here and send a rider ahead to catch up with me, and I will come back and show you the correct way to go. So they stopped, you know, wasted 2 or 3 days, I don't know, wasted some time. And the rider caught up with Hastings, and Hastings rode about halfway back with the rider, stood up in his stirrups and pointed into the mountains and said, you know, take that valley, take that whatever, and left them and went back. So Hastings never did come back and lead the Donner Party the correct way. And there really wasn't a road anyway. No wagon had ever been through here. So here at this crossing, Hastings had left a note to the Donner Party telling them not to go through Weber Canyon. So as a result, they had to blaze a trail from here to Salt Lake City. And that was a trail that the Mormons followed the next year and for the next 22 years. So here's another major point where the Donner Party got delayed because there was no road. They had to blaze a trail and that really slowed them down. Then they had 40 miles of desert. They lost oxen, they had to abandon wagons, they threw stuff away. So by the time they got through the desert into Nevada, they were in tough shape anyway. And they still had to go across Nevada and cross the Sierra Nevada mountains, which we know they didn't quite make it. Well, shoot, I've got to backtrack for a third time. This morning I went to one marker, turned out I didn't care for it, and I didn't know that I had to backtrack, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles to get back on the freeway to go to the next one. And then this morning I forgot to fill up with fuel. I got down to a little town called Hefner, and my GPS said that there were 2 places to get fuel, and neither one existed. So I backtracked 8 miles to get fuel, came back to Hefner, a couple of miles up this road. Now there's a sign that says road closed 10 miles ahead. So I can't continue here. I've got to go right back past where I got fuel 8 or 10 or 12 miles ago. So my third backtrack. But it's better than working. I'm at Little Mountain Summit, not far from Salt Lake City. This seems to be a very, very popular bicyclist route. People running. The last summit along the Pioneer Trail descends northwest until it reaches Immigration Creek. And the Donner Party passed over the summit August 21st, 1846. And the Mormons July 21st, 1847. 11 months later. It's a beautiful day. Hey, Silvia. Well, I've reached the last campsite of the first Mormon party coming to Salt Lake City. And they camped here July 23rd, 1847, and made it to Salt Lake City the next day, July 24th. It had to be a pretty emotional moment because they had spent, a year and a half trying to get here. They had started their journey and then stayed, they call it the winter quarters, I think somewhere in Iowa, I'm really not sure. And then Brigham Young and 140, 50 people came ahead of the main group to scout the trail and to locate the site where they were going to start their city, Zion. But what's interesting about this place right now, it looks like that they're planning for a flood. Either they've had a flood or they know one's coming. They've got sandbags already filled. They got sand in a pile with shovels waiting for you. Empty bags. Oh, look at this, 1,000 sandbags. 1,000 sandbags with string is in each one of those. So that's 2,000 sandbags. Wow. And they have this device here, I guess is how you fill them. 4 at a time. I've reached Donner Hill. Lured by the Langsford-Hastings assurance that his shortcut from the well-known trail to Oregon and California would save 250 miles and weeks of travel, the ill-fated Donner Party reached this place August 23rd, 1846, after spending 16 days to hack out a 36-mile road through the Wasatch Mountains. Here at this narrow mouth of the canyon, they were stopped by what seemed impenetrable brush and boulders. And that would be this, where the road's going right now. And there were, I guess it was thick with brush, and they were bone weary, tired of that kind of labor, so they decided to goad their oxen to climb the hill in front of me, right here, to the left of that building probably. And they took every yoke of oxen that they had and pulled each of the 23 wagons up the hill. And after this ordeal, the oxen needed rest, but there was no time. The party pushed on to salt flats where many of the oxen gave out. This caused delays which led to the disaster in the Sierra Mountains. A year later, July 22nd, 1847, Brigham Young's pioneer party, following the Donners and benefiting from their labor, reached this spot. They sent a party on downstream to see if they could cut a road along the stream instead of going over that hill. And actually, it took their work party about 4 hours to cut a trail through where the road is now. And among the lessons learned that day was one stated succinctly by Virginia Reed in a letter to prospective immigrants back home. Hurry along as fast as you can and never take no shortcuts. And I just realized one more thing. The person that said that it took every yoke of oxen to pull each wagon up the hill was 12-year-old Virginia Reed. And she's the one down here that later wrote to prospective immigrants, hurry along as fast as you can and never take no shortcuts. Okay, now Salt Lake City. I'm looking at Salt Lake City from a park called This Is the Place. And supposedly this is where Brigham Young said, this is far enough, we found our place, or something like that. And can you imagine the immigrants that came from Europe? Like I said, they may have started in January on a ship, traveled across the ocean, and for 4 or 5 years there was a period where they pushed hand carts along the Mormon trail to get here. You get here in July or August after that long journey, and you look out over the valley, and it's a little hazy today. I don't know if it would have been hazy in that day. That had to be emotional, extremely emotional, thinking about what it would be like, what it would look like. And then you come down Immigrant Canyon, a steep descent, and then you come out into the open and bam, here you are. And I don't know what it looked like then. I don't know where the settlement was. It wasn't down in the valley. It wasn't that big at that time, but that had to be a big deal. And this is considered the end of the Mormon Pioneer Trail. I'm not going to explore the entire 450 acres of the park, but this seems to be the main monument right here. This is a very good view of the monument with snow-capped peaks behind it. Those guys look pretty excited to be here. And I like this one because it shows oxen. There's 2 yoke of oxen. And I don't know if you can see it, there's a chain. The oxen were hooked to a chain, hooked to a wagon. They didn't use a tongue on the wagon like you would with mules, and I don't know why, but that's how it was done. I would say that this commemorates the fur trappers and the early explorers that came to this area before Brigham Young. And way up on top has got to be Brigham Young. I'm north of Salt Lake City going toward Logan, where I'm going to stay tonight. And after all the backtracking I did today, I wondered if I would get to the motel before dark.